Mysterious Teachers of Reddit. What is the surprisingly smartest thing your stupidest student has ever said? Story 1. When I was teaching grade 5 a few years back, I had a student who really struggled academically and misbehaved a lot. During one of his punishments, which was washing dishes with me from our morning breakfast time, I straight up asked him why he kept getting into trouble. The boy admitting that he just knew that if he misbehaved, he would get to spend time with me 11. And we would talk about life and his hobbies and such. I found out later on that his father had been incarcerated for pretty much the entirety of the boy's life. So, the stupidest and most misbehaved kid in the class was actually just playing the system the whole time, and really just needed a positive male role model in his life. After that, I told him he didn't need to act up in order to spend time with me. He could just ask for extra responsibility, and I would give it to him. He was mostly better behaved after that. I miss him a lot. I'm absolutely flabbergasted by the response to this post. I didn't think anyone would see it. I appreciate you all. All I can say is spend some time to talk to someone in need. Story 2. I'm teaching English as a foreign language, and one of my students hasn't been attending for a year. When he finally came, I gave him an essay to write. He wrote it in perfect German because he thought that we were studying German. The guy had been learning German all year long only to learn that we were studying English. This is both the smartest and the stupidest thing I can imagine. Story 3. I don't know if this counts, but I was teaching a public speaking class. It was mostly 9th grade. They were all nervous about their first big speech, and I tried to ease their nerves by saying, "I promise giving a speech won't kill you." Then some kid shouted, "Do you know how many people in history have died while giving a speech?" Story 4. My favorite student of all time, my 9 years of teaching, was a kid named Logan. Logan was this giant kid, tall as I was 52 in the 5th grade, and massive. Logan also had an information processing learning disability. He processed information more slowly than most people. He spoke very slowly and deliberately with long pauses, and just saw the world differently. Logan had learned early on that if he played dumb, people would treat him like he was stupid and do his work for him. He had this look he would put on his face, mouth agape, lower lip hanging down, legit drooling, eyes unfocused, and he would refuse to speak to you. I figured that out really quickly, and after 2 times of me making him talk to me at recess when he refused in class, he didn't pull that look with me anymore. It was a complete facade. Anyway, because of how Logan processed the world, he would spend his recess slowly walking the grounds and picking up anything interesting he found. He found things no one else would find: coins, sequins, a box of sewing machine spools, etc., and he'd bring them to us teachers if he didn't know what they were or just wanted to share them with us. So one day at recess, he comes up to me and the other teacher at recess duty with me, and he's holding a condom wrapper. He asks us what it is, and the other teacher quickly says, "Oh, Logan, that's just a candy wrapper for grown-ups. Here, let me take that and throw it away." And Logan Dad looks us in the face and says, "Oh, good. I thought it was a condom, and those shouldn't be out here on the playground." And then he turned and ambled off. His emotional intelligence was incredibly high. I had a student with autism in class, Tyler. Tiny little guy, super sweet, but would have occasional severe meltdowns. I will always have the image in my head of tiny little Tyler, mid-meltdown, swinging his arms at giant Logan and screaming, while Logan simply stood there and took it and gently patted him on the head. TLDR, I don't care if it's too long and no one reads it. Logan was one of the best people I've ever met in my life, and I have so many good memories of him. Edit, thanks for all the kind words, everyone. I'm so happy that Logan could bring the same smile to your face that he brought to mine. Honestly, sharing this story has almost made me want to go back to teaching again. Story 5. I teach 1st grade. So many not as dramatic as other replies. I had a kid who was kind of never quite paying attention. We read a dinosaur book and were answering very basic 1st grade questions in the back of the book. It literally had a brachiosaurus and said the dinosaur's legs are long be short. He pretty much got stuck here and didn't move on. To me, it was the easiest question in the book, but some of the students are low-level English learners, so it is possible he just couldn't understand the words long or short. After like 7 minutes of doing my rounds and assisting other students, I came back to him. He had written in C, long and short are both opinion words. Story 6. Used to teach chess to elementary level kids. Would run chess camp over the summer. 20 to 40 kids come in every day for a full school day, but every period is basically a chess class. Lasts a week. On the first day, I would tell kids they need to lose to get better, which is true in a game like chess, especially in the beginning. I would tell them you have to lose 50 games before you can improve in chess. Well, on about day 3, I'm walking from the field to the class and see one of my students, 2nd grader, walking the other direction and ask him offhand, "How's chess going?" And he responds, "Well, I've lost all my games, so I guess I'm doing great." Story 7. I have a student in my class with autism. He is very high functioning, but he's a couple years behind his grade level. We were discussing the American Revolution, and one of the vocab words we had was tyrannical leader. I jokingly told the class that if I was ever the leader of the country, that's the kind of leader I would be, and I went on to say that all of your teachers would be that way too. Most of the class looked at me blankly, but this one kid with autism understood what I was saying and looked at me, and while trying to contain his laughter says, well, that's because all teachers have a superiority complex. I just couldn't help but laugh in front of the class for the next 5 minutes. Story 8, this kid isn't dumb, but most of the things he says are just because he talks a lot and likes to argue. This kid goes to a private school which is open for 11 hours every day, even though the school day runs for 7 hours. If parents need to drop their kids off early or pick them up late, they have that option. He told me that he really wanted to get a dog, but his parents won't do it because there would be no one home to take care of the dog most of the time. The rest of the conversation went like this: me, that makes sense. Puppies and dogs need lots of attention. It wouldn't be nice to leave them home alone all day. Kid, well, we could bring it to doggy daycare me every day. If someone's taking care of your dog for 8 hours every day, is that even your dog? Him, well, that's what they do with kids. So real and so sad. That moment has stayed with me for a few years now. Story 9, I was on lunch duty one day, and a middle school boy jokingly said, Mr. Original Sanitizer, you want to buy me an extra? I replied, well, do I look like your daddy? He replied, straight-faced, I don't know, you might, I ain't never met him. I bought him an extra. An extra is something extra to the basic school lunch, like an ice cream sandwich. Story 10, I don't want to be dumb like my mama teacher at an inner-city school for a time, where almost all the students had free breakfast and lunch written about it before. Lots of the kids realized and knew they were in a no-win situation and a downward spiral in terms of education and situation in life. Quite a number of them tried their damnedest, though, to get out of it. Lots of times the kids don't know what is awaiting them at home. Many parents don't read to their kids or help them with homework. Many just can't because they themselves barely have an education, or they are in just bad situations. One student came in and said their mama chose to pay the cable TV bill over the hot water bill, and another week their mom shot themselves in the hand with a gun she borrowed from some guy. Later, the same mom chose to pay her cell phone bill over electricity, and that student had enough and decided to start studying and try to climb out. There's hope. Story 11, I've mentioned this before. And also, it is genuinely difficult to tell who is the stupidest. Kids are smart some days and clueless others. Some grow out of it. Anyway, we were talking about cheetahs being the fastest land mammal. Some inner-city kid swells up and says he can beat a cheetah in a race. The class laughs. Kid doesn't let it go. Finally, he just says, I can beat a fat cheetah in a race. I'm just thinking, maybe... Story 12, I hate the word in describing this kiddo. And it wasn't so much what she said, but she certainly wasn't stupid. But as an at-risk youth counselor, I can say she was very low functioning. She went AWOL one night out of the blue. Not one staff saw her leave. Usually when this happens, kids go do dumb kid stuff like going to park to drink and smoke teenage. Well, we didn't see her for 2 days. We finally got a phone call from a person who had taken her in for hundreds of miles away. When she got back to our facility, she had this nervous look, knowing I was going to scold her. I was too impressed. I asked her how she did it, and she said she kept hopping buses. I guess none of the drivers had the heart to kick her off, so there she went. I took a very big risk in the fact that I congratulated her on her journey. Her eyes lit up when I told her she had managed to travel farther than any kid that had ever gone AWOL. She never did it again, and actually graduated the program with success. Still a booger, but I'll always remember that booger. Story 13, I had a Band-Aid on my elbow, one of the big ones, and my student was trying to work out what it was. It was a drunken fall. I said, ninjas, it got me. He said it sounded like a ninjuri. I laughed out loud. Story 14, some of my 5th graders were playing with a basketball in the hallway. I told them to stop. They did for a second, then continued. I said, guys, why do you keep bouncing that ball in the hallway? And one of them just looked at me and said, if you were 10, you'd do it too. I was like, yeah, I guess I would. Story 15, 2 incidents come to mind. Kids, 1,011-year-olds having a disagreement on their group assignment. I instinctively call out the naughty kid whose whingy voice is ingrained in my brain, and as the first voice I notice, he jumps up and screams that his group are egotistical, who can't even decide on a topic 2 days into their assignment. Was impressed by his vocabulary, but more so that the small amount that had been done on the assignment already was completely his, still had to send him to the principal. The other children in the group were punished as well. Not just the kid yelling. I was on prac in a class of 7 to 8-year-olds. A pair of girls gave me a drawing and said I was really pretty. Another girl who seemed to be from a lower-class family compared to her classmates and had learning delays heard this and came up to me saying, I don't think you are pretty. I was taken aback, but kids are kids and don't always have filters. She saw the look on my face and followed up quickly saying, I think you are kind and smart. Being pretty doesn't matter. Girl could be more than pretty. Are you going to stay as our teacher forever? And that was the moment I knew this profession was for me. Story 16, I don't understand what's going on in class because you explain things so only the smart kids understand. He was absolutely right. I wasn't meeting my students on their level and building them up. I was immediately expecting them to be on my level, and that just wasn't realistic. 5 years ago, as a brand new teacher, this was an important thing for me to hear. It completely changed the way I plan lessons, and am a much better teacher now. Because of what he said, I still think back on that moment. Sometimes the students impact our lives just as much as we impact theirs and teach us important lessons. Edit my first ever silver. Thanks so much. Edit 2 holy moly platinum. Thank you. Story 17. When I was teaching subtracting across 507 to 254 to second graders, one kid said it's like when your mom needs milk and you go to your neighbor and no one is there, so you go to the next door. Story 18. I've been teaching for 10 years, either to kids about to be kicked out of the system or at a school with mostly kids with low socioeconomic status and are learning English as a second language. Honestly, I don't even know how to gauge intelligence anymore. I've had AP kids in my class that can't figure out unless it's spoon-fed to them. I've had severely handicapped kids that are doing the best work in my class. I had a kid that has so low that I had to repeat the previous day's lesson to him every day, and we never got very far, but he could ride his bike the 15 blocks home and navigate 3 different gang territories without incident. I've had kids that were headed to prestigious universities that couldn't figure out how to make a box of mac and cheese if they had to. Story 19, just this past Tuesday, I had a student struggling with science homework, actually math skills, but for my science class, he was almost mute about what he needed, what he didn't understand. No matter how much I tried to guide him through unit conversions, the study period was ending, and I had to let him go, with little progress made. As he was packing up, he told me he'll try it again after art class. I'm usually smarter at this after I do some art. I thought that was an interesting observation, and I asked him why he thought that might be the case. He said I'm pretty good at art. It's easier to try hard stuff while I still feel like I'm good at something because I want to keep feeling like that. That's the entire educational psychology argument for fostering a sense of competency in the support of intrinsic motivation. In the fewest words possible, I actually think he's one of my smartest students. Really, he just struggles to make a show on paper. Story 20, English as a second language teacher here. I specifically work with new-to-country students who have only just arrived in the U.S. One day a few years ago, I was trying to explain to my class why we were practicing a tornado drill. Many had never heard a tornado, so I found a quick YouTube clip to show what they are. After we finished, one girl was visibly freaked out but very clearly wanted to be prepared for this monstrosity. So she took out her planner and asked me what days the tornado comes to the city. I tried to be consoling, but inside I was laughing so hard. Story 21, student Gothic novels with my low ability, special needs group, and they were asked to say how they feel about horror films. My student came out with, I love horror films because they make me more aware of my surroundings. I was very impressed. Story 22, when I was teaching second grade, I had a mug that said I teach muggles because Hogwarts wasn't hiring. A boy noticed the HP font and asked what it meant. I translated for him, and he went, but you don't even know if we're muggles or not. We might get a letter at 11 years old. I was quite impressed with that quick thinking. Story 23, I teach ESL. I had a student about 7, and we were all doing the workbook. The lesson revolved around things like big and small, old and new, clean and dirty, as well as toys like dolls, yo-yos, and thisthathesesithos. It is easily one of my least favorite lessons because it really is a lot for the young students to understand. The photo was a boy pointing to a desk with a few small, round objects on it. The girl was taking forever, but she always seemed a bit slower in class. And so I wasn't too shocked. I was checking the other students' work and figured she would finish in time, and I would help her at the correction stage. Finally, she makes it up to my desk, and I get to the picture. The obvious answer was these are small. What did she have, though? These are marbles. The kids hadn't even learned that word. How she came up with it left me absolutely baffled. But from that point on, I never questioned her intelligence. I figured she just knew different things, but it didn't mean she didn't understand. She clearly just spent 30 minutes racking her brain for the best word for small. ESL, every day is a surprise. Story 24, kid was answering a question and used the word vernacular. Everyone just stopped and looked at him, and he was like, yeah, that's right, I know words. This was grade 9. Story 25, I don't think I could declare any of my students as the stupidest, but one who wasn't the best at algebra definitely got the better of me one day. I was working with another teacher, Mr. S, in an incarceration setting for teenage boys. These young men would often ask questions to test boundaries, force reactions. See, it's jail school, so it's a bit less formal. Anyhow, in a room of about 10 students, my co-teacher and I would do a funny man-straight-man routine. Typically, this would fall along the lines of my absolutely agreeing with anything my co-teacher said he knew about me, that I had a criminal record, that I used to weigh 320 pounds, that I'd been married 4 times. See, then, as the straight man, I'd play along and fill in details of what should have been obvious absurdities. One day, Mr. S went beyond the bounds of believability for our students when he said I had a tattoo of his name at the base of my right buttock. I maintained that this was true, that it was the result of a lost bet on a football season, but several of the boys weren't buying it. One of these said, "Mister, for real, you got any tattoos?" Nearly all of my students had several tattoos, typically visible. I was forced to admit I had none, but chose poorly in explaining myself. "Okay, you're right, I don't have any tattoos. Why not? You have something against tattoos?" "No, not at all. I just don't think I could make a decision like that. Like what? Saying this is what I want for the rest of my life. Wait, mister, ain't you married?" Raucous laughter from the class, and I joined in. TLDR, a less than stellar student defeated my personal argument regarding tattoos by pointing out my wedding band. Story 26. There was this kid in my biological themes in film class who would always try to crack jokes and didn't get any of the deeper themes of the movies we watched. However, when I showed them Lorenzo's oil, and I remarked how the parents were to try and make sure the child was as comfortable as possible before he died, said student replied, "Isn't that how everyone lives?" I had to take a second to think about how strangely deep that was coming from this class clown. He then went on to state he didn't actually know the occupation of the father in the movie, so it kind of ruined the moment, but that stuck with me. Story 27. I had a set of twins in my class one time. I knew them from around school, but I didn't know there were 2 of them. I just thought there was one who was really fast or whatever, so on the first day I'm calling roll, and I see 2 similar names with the same last name, and call the first one. Girl says she's here. I ask if there are 2 of her. No, there's one of me, but I do have a twin. Also, another time a student said, "It's easy to sound the smartest when you're the only one talking." Not sure why that one stuck with me. Story 28. I had a student in 9th grade biology named Manny. He wasn't the stupidest kid I ever had, but he certainly wasn't a Rhodes Scholar. I told my kids if they would get through mitosis and meiosis, I would answer any questions they had about the mechanics of reproduction. One girl asked about birth control, whether you take it only when you have, or if you have to take it every day. I answered, and Manny, who had never heard of birth control, said, "Wait, miss, wait, you're telling me there's a pill girls take and they don't get pregnant. Why all these girls pregnant?" Story 29. I'm teaching in an elementary school. We were talking about what's typical for boys and girls, and about whether these stereotypes are really true. A boy, who was interrupting class the whole year and didn't take much interest in class, raised his hand and said, "But isn't this totally stupid? Isn't it most important that you're happy? Doesn't matter if boys wear dresses. If they like it, they can wear whatever they want." I was really proud of him. Story 30. I teach life skills to kids. I have to give a pre- and post-test to the kids every year. I personally think it's extremely poorly written, and kids usually struggle because it was obviously made by someone who doesn't work with kids. I help them through it as much as possible without giving the answers. It's all true-false. A lot of the questions use logical fallacies, such as saying most people my age, which again is too high level. One 4th grade kid, who is very smart and a little impulsive, raised his hand and said, "Miss, isn't that a matter of opinion?" I about fell over. Story 31. In a college American literature class, there sat in the front row a student named Jeremy Lucas, who dressed like a rockabilly and always ate Hostess snowballs and drank chocolate milk and never said a word. One day, after drawing blanks from all of us regarding the narrative themes of The Great Gatsby, the professor turned and said, "Perhaps Mr. Lucas, you could enlighten the class on your views of the subject." Jeremy replies, "May I stand?" After the professor granted him the floor, Jeremy then took over the class and delivered a 45-minute lecture on Gatsby and Fitzgerald's view of a post-World War in America. It was interesting, informative, and better than anything the professor had done all year. At the end of the lecture, the professor turned to Jeremy and laughing said, "Enjoy your snowballs, Mr. Lucas." Story 32. I'm a ski instructor, and ick if this even counts, but I had a student who was having a lot of trouble stopping using the usual way we teach them the pizza. You make a wedge with your skis and dig your edges in, and their parent insisted that they still go up the big lift, so I had to oblige. Anyways, we got to the top of the hill, and of course he couldn't stop, so I skated down faster than he was going and caught him. The rest of the class caught up, and we got to talking about midway through what I was teaching them. I got to talking about turns and stopping using gravity, and he asked if he could try something. I said yes, with much hesitance, and went down the hill expecting to have to catch him. At which point he comes down and executes a perfect hockey, stop turning sideways to the hill, and skidding to a stop. He didn't exactly say anything, but I figured I might as well share my story. Story 33. You said for something to be living, it has to be able to reproduce. The dude got his penis cut off. He's dead. I don't care about brainwaves. He's dead. Also, protein, at least they listen. Freshman in biology. Story 34. I don't even know exactly what the topic of discussion was, but I think we were defining some basic terms ideas related to social ethics. My field is in the humanities. One mediocre student asked how we will know when we've arrived at the right definition if we have no knowledge of it beforehand. Said student didn't realize he had inadvertently stumbled upon an epistemological conundrum that has troubled philosophers going all the way back to Plato. If not further, it would be like asking someone to go out and find me a dinglehopper. Well, if you have no idea what a dinglehopper is, then you can't very well know when you've got it. Story 35. Well, they weren't stupid, just very young. But I was complaining about how dark it is in the room, and this little girl says the lights are off, Ms. Marissa. I felt so dumb alone. I had just began working there a couple days prior to that incident and was still getting used to where everything was and had forgotten to turn the lights on after nap because the windows made the room fairly bright. Story 36. There was a boy named Justin in my history class. He loved to flirt with other girls and do dumb stuff with his friends. He got terrible grades. He has to repeat the grade that year. I assigned the class a project about WW1. Justin made a one-paper report, and as I was reading it, I was prepared for jokes and off-topic subjects. As I read it, it had no jokes or spelling errors. He compared WW1 to a video game called Battlefield and how the developers forgot to add significant things. And he cited the things they forgot to add. I pieced together that he was paying attention. He wasn't getting good test scores because he just didn't feel like it. He just needed something to compare the subject to, or an open response question. After I graded it, I talked with him the next day and told him I understood what he needed to learn, and for the rest of the year he got decent grades. But since it was almost summer at that point, he had to repeat the grade, but he got all as the next year because I told my fellow employees what he needed to have to learn correctly. He now works as a lawyer in a big city. Who would have thought one report could have changed someone learning entirely? Story 37 edit. So apparently this confused some people. X and Y are specific to where I live and work. I don't want y'all to just look that up. Pop by and say hello. They're not array indexes. I use square brackets to indicate where I've changed the quote. Now change to, and edit to if you want to have more comprehensive comments, see below. My inbox is blowing up over this, and I did not intend to put in as much effort as I have. Computer science. X a notable local event that involves walking to every bar between two popular points that day of the year. Why one bar in particular which has 2 or 3 companies inside of it, a mall of bartenders, if you will, to another student. Dude, arrays aren't that complicated. It's like X except every bar is Y with infinite bars inside. You can't know if their food sucks this year until you're already inside looking at it. You don't have to eat it, but you have to look at it. Story 38. I wouldn't use the word stupid to describe this student, but I had this girl one year as a student teacher and then a second year when I landed my first teaching job. She was autistic and struggled to get her work done and make friends. She was also bilingual. One day during class, she started interpreting a video in real time. It was amazing. Interpretation like that is extremely difficult, but she was able to do it like it was nothing. Sadly, she passed away the next year, but she will always have a special place in my heart. Story 39. But if we have a gun buyback, only good people would do it. Criminals won't go for that because they make more money robbing people and stuff than they could make selling their gun. I hadn't even thought of that. It's like a blacksmith selling his hammer. Story 40. Can't bring myself to call any kid stupid, only stupid behaviors. But one of the students who struggled most in my HS math class once turned to me and said sometimes being a good person is very difficult. No. Story 41. Private music teacher, 6 years old student. Do you have a job? Me, yeah, dude. I teach music lessons, student, but I thought jobs were supposed to make money me. Touche. Story 42. Attention. Serious tag, notice jokes, puns, and off-topic comments are not permitted in any comment, parent or child. Parent comments that aren't from the target group will be removed, along with their child replies. Report comments that violate these rules. Posts that have few relevant answers within the first hour and posts that are not appropriate for the serious tag will be removed. Consider doing an AMA request instead. Thanks for your cooperation and enjoy the discussion. I am a bot, and this action was performed automatically. Please contact the moderators of this subreddit message compose or AskReddit if you have any questions or concerns. Story 43. This girl was not my stupidest student, but she certainly wasn't as smart as she thought she was. One day, I was talking about life in the 1950s, and she tells me that her mom was around in the 1950s. This was 2011, and I know her mom, and I know that mom is not even close to being in her 60s. I ask her child, do you know how long ago the 1950s were? Yeah, when there were still black and white people. I still can't work out if this statement was incredibly naive or incredibly insightful, but I've never forgotten it. Story 44, not my student, but this was told to me by a colleague. This girl wasn't necessarily dumb, but had some severe mental issues that made you think otherwise sometime. And not talking a learning disability or autism. She was a schizo and had multiple personalities. Anyway, this girl is in the first grade, and something happens that annoys her, and she makes that exclamation, "Oh, I could just kill you," or something similar. So the kid had to meet with the principal to explain that telling teachers you could kill them isn't really something appropriate. So the principal said, "Girl, you didn't really plan on killing Mrs. So-and-so, right?" And the kid responded, "Of course not. I had nothing to use." Story 45, finally my chance to shine. A very sleepy fifth grader in my class a few years ago asked if we were going to leave berry that day. I said, "A leave berry? I've never had one before. What's it taste like? Books?" Story 46, the student I work with is incredibly clever. He is autistic and at about a first grade level. We're working on sight words and reading, and head stare at the word for a few seconds. Then at me, ID sounded out for him, and then head say it. It started happening way more often with words he definitely knew. So I made him start sounding them out alone repeatedly until he figured out the word. After 2 days of this, I said sound it out, and he actually rolled his eyes and said the word, had just been lazy and wanted me to do it for him. Since then, I found a lot of things he's capable of, but people underestimate him and do it for him, so he's gotten stubborn and lazy. Story 47, preschoolers are so honest. It was carpet time, and the kids were all sitting down. Crisscross applesauce was said in the distance, and one of the kids had stated that no one should say it like that. "We're not folding out legs into applesauce. It's more like a pretzel. We shouldn't say that." I mean, technically the kid is right. I have now removed this saying from my classroom and let the kids sit however they want on the carpet. This kid wasn't necessarily one of my slower ones or anything like that. He was more like my class clown. Story 48, one day, a pretty bad kid was actually putting forth some effort in math, so I thought he raised his hand because he was stuck, so I helped him in the same manner I help all my students, guiding them towards the answer while not giving the answer. After I helped him, a few minutes passed, and he was really excited and said, "Mr. H, I got the answer." I said, -17. And he said, I got the answer." He proceeded to never let me live down the fact that he finessed me out of that answer for the rest of the year. Story 49. So I was teaching a class that were studying to help people with disabilities, addictions, or even in prison. They'd help those people become more independent and support them with things they couldn't do. The first year, these students started at a facility focused on people with several disabilities. These people all had mental and physical disabilities and are unable to live without help. So my stupidest student is a student who isn't very smart academically. He has concentration issues and is easily distracted. What might seem easy to understand for us wasn't for him because he couldn't keep his head in one place. At the beginning of the year, he said he didn't want to work with this group of clients, but he had to. In the end, he became to appreciate the work and actually had a great connection with the clients, even if he only complained in class about having to clean. He worked at the farm part of the facility. But what he said at the end of the trial will stick with me forever because of the difficulty this work has. This student said, "If you can work with these people, you can work with anyone." He said this because he knew how difficult the work is, but also because he came to appreciate his clients and learn how to understand nonverbal communication, which he wasn't really aware of before. The work he and his classmates choose is difficult because they had to have endurance, patience. They'd have to be able to care for people, but also be strict, and he managed to kind of capture it in one sentence. Unfortunately, it was only an internship, and I had to let these students go after a year, but I'm grateful I got to see them grow and see them learn to understand the field they choose. Story 50, I teach English as a foreign language, and one of my Costa Rican students brought a bottle of Smirnoff to class. I left for a quick bathroom break to ask my boss if I should confiscate the liquor considering my students are all around 15 to 16, and she asked if he was being disruptive to the class. He hadn't been, so she said I could let it slide and just observe and see what happened. The student in question hadn't really participated much in the weeks prior and had struggled to integrate into classroom activities. He's not necessarily the stupid student, but rather the one who never really participated. So class goes on, and the young man has consumed several shots with no shame, and we start a conversation activity. While the rest of the students are doing pretty well and using most of the vocab, all of a sudden this student goes off in some of the best English I'd ever heard my student speak, talking about all sorts of social issues in Costa Rica and comparing them to other parts of the world. Apparently, the kid didn't have a lack of knowledge. He just needed a little liquid courage to fully participate. After class, I asked him why he didn't participate as much before this lesson, and he said that he never thought he had it in him before today. I told him that while I appreciated his sudden wealth of participation, I'd like to see him try to participate sans the alcohol in future lessons. He didn't really, but I thought it was an interesting story,